Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. In today's episode of my podcast story, we have David McClam, the engaging host of True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People. David's podcast dives deep into the world of true crime, why spotlighting authors who bring these stories to life. What makes David's podcasting journey particularly compelling is his personal background as a survivor of domestic abuse, an experience that shapes his authentic storytelling approach. With nearly a decade of podcasting experience, including 4 years hosting A Day with Crime, David has evolved into not just a podcast host, but also a podcast startup coach, helping others launch their shows the right way. He's here today to share his inspiring journey of how he transformed personal trauma into a platform that connects with listeners, champions, survivors, and helps aspiring podcasters find their voice in this increasingly crowded digital landscape. Can you tell us your name and what you do?
My name is David McClam. I am a podcaster. Right now, I have 2 active shows: just True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People, and Extinguished is my second one.
Okay. And can you expatiate a little bit about each of those podcasts? Like in depth, what the show looks, the format of the show, who the show is for, and what is covered on the show.
Sure. So, True Crime, Authors, Extraordinary People is a unique show. It is still at this point the only 3-faceted show that I cover true crime one week, I interview an author the next, and then I talk to an extraordinary person, which is someone that has been through something in life and survived it in the third week. And then that just repeats that cycle. And then Extinguish is a podcast I have with my co-host, LaDonna Humphrey, where we cover only cases of missing and murdered people there.
Oh, okay. Is it all over the world or just a specific state or country for the second podcast? In terms of the murder and the crime and all those things.
We cover any missing person anywhere, United States or abroad, that comes up. We do a lot of cases too that nobody else will touch, like African American cases, indigenous people cases, people that's been in addiction, because these are usually people that get left behind, and especially children. So yeah, any case, anywhere, we'll cover it.
Yeah, okay. What first inspired you to launch your podcast? What was the aha moment? I said, oh yeah, I'm going to hit record and start the podcast.
Well, to be honest, my oldest daughter, Geneva, is the reason why I started the podcast.
Okay.
So we did have a show called A Day with Crime that ran for 4.5 years straight. Well, at the time we did that, we didn't know this, but we were told that we had broke history twice. One, because at that point we were the only father-daughter team in any genre of podcasting, and the other being that we're African American, we were the first to do that. But that show ran for 4.5 years. It was a variety show of nothing but true crime. She called me one day and said, "Dad, let's do a podcast." And I said, no, because I had just did YouTube for 15 years, and I knew that doing a podcast was a whole different skill set. She bugged me for about 6 months before I finally said yes. And I told my wife, this is not going to last more than 2 weeks, so I'll go ahead and do it. And we were around for 4.5 years.
You're wrong. I was like, yeah, 2 weeks. We just started. Oh, in 2 weeks it will be done. And you're like, oh, what's happening? It's 6 months now. Okay. So she's serious about it. 8 months, 1 year. Well, for 4 years. Wow, that's incredible. You mentioned you had a background in YouTube. Can you expatiate on that? What were you doing as a YouTuber?
Yeah, so I was a video game influencer, specifically for the game Rock Band. If you guys ever heard that game with the plastic guitars, drums, microphones, I did that for almost 15 years. So if you go to the channel Cena's Corner, a lot of that is still up there. Every guitar that was a third party, every drum set, even some stuff from Harmonix themselves, who was the creator of the game, it came to my house first, and I reviewed it. And it came to a point to where if I didn't review it or say it was good, nobody would actually buy it. So I did that for 15 years.
Oh, that's a lot of what do you call it now? Experience and practice that just comes into podcast and every form of content creation you happen to do now or in the future.
Yes, it certainly does.
Yeah. I've noticed you started 2 different podcasts that cover crime. What's what's the history behind your fascination with true crime?
So I was interested in true crime since I've been a child. I think the case that brought me to the table was the Jim Jones Guyana tragedy, which happened in about 78. I was born in 72. So I was about 6 years old when that happened. But as I got older, I looked into that case and then I just got fascinated with how true crime works. What makes a person do certain things that they do? Why are there certain crimes that's not talked about that should be? And where can my voice fit in that? And so for me, naturally, true crime fit. I've got all kinds of books in here that just deals with that. So I just think true crime, not for exploiting it. You have to be kind of careful with that because a lot of people like to exploit true crime or they exploit the perpetrator, but to bring knowledge to it. There's a lot of cases in true crime that we don't know that we should know about
Yeah.
that happened in history. So that's why I do that.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, when you started the second podcast, right? w- Why? Like, I'm curious, right? You know, your first podcast you did with your daughter, Geneva, is a true crime podcast, and now you've started a podcast. I know it's a combination of true crime authors and extraordinary people. But why did you start a true crime podcast? I know I can't exactly call it a true crime podcast because you know it's three podcasts combined into one. But you know, since it starts with true crime, I feel like I can call it true crime podcast. Why did you start a true crime podcast when you already had a true crime podcast? I don't know if that makes sense. You know, you already had a podcast, a good what's the name you call it? A good what's the name of the podcast? The podcast you started with your daughter.
Oh, a day with crime.
Oh, a day with crime. A day with crime. Why did you starts a true crime, why didn't you just convert that one and you know say, okay, this is the new podcast we're going to be doing. We changed direction, we've moved, you know, we've changed the vision and everything. This is what we'll be doing now instead of starting a new podcast altogether.
When you brand a podcast a certain way and you change it, it doesn't have the same flair or flavor. So the A Day with a Crime podcast was a podcast that was started by me and my daughter. So it was always a team podcast. And my daughter, when she decided not to do podcasting anymore, I did try a couple of episodes by myself. She had been sick a couple of times through the years and did an episode by
Oh,
myself. Everybody would say, "Where's Geneva?" So it didn't sit quite as well because it was always branded as a two-person true crime podcast. And I kind of want to preserve that too. So when I moved on to true crime, all those extraordinary people, that's why I reopened that. I wanted to continue with true crime, but since 2020, more than 1 million or so, I think now the number should be 1 billion podcasts was started because of the pandemic. So
yeah.
a lot of that, if you look, was in the true crime genre. So the reason why the Three Faceted show is because at this point in time now, it wasn't good enough just to say, I have a true crime show, true crime and
Yeah.
authors, or just true crime, that's it. You have to have some kind of a niche that separates you from the other true crime stories out there. So no one else was doing a combination of a show where it would be true crime, something else, and then something else. At first, it was just true crime and authors. It remained that way for the first season because in this about 6 months in, I started to experiment with extraordinary people. And so I just say, hey, I'm gonna try this segment. We're gonna beta test it. If it works, we'll keep it. But the reason I came with extraordinary people is because I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. And I said, hey, if I have this story, what if there's a whole lot of stories out there that everybody would like to come and tell that would help the next person? And so that's when Extraordinary People was born, and it was a hit, so it stuck around.
Okay. Just I'm curious. A day with crime. Does the podcast still live? If I go search for it, would I find it?
You will still find it. It is still up to this day, yes.
Okay, so the last episode that was dropped on that podcast, when was that? Okay. Uh,
Oh my goodness, at this time,
let me see if I can
probably
see.
about what, 2, 3 years ago now. Let's take a look. I haven't looked at that in a while, but yeah, I'm assuming it's about 2 or 3 years ago from that last episode that was dropped.
A day with crime. Why can't I find it?
So David Crime, if you go to Apple Podcasts, it'll be the first one that popped up. The last episode,
Oh, I'm searching on Spotify.
Spotify should still have it, but I don't know why it doesn't show up there. But yeah, it was season 5, Episode 124 of The Disappearance of Matrice Richardson. It's the last episode we ever shot
Yeah.
there.
Okay. I mean, it was fun while it lasted, and the fact that it's still up there, people can still go and peruse it. So, true crime, more like news, and politics, and all these other time sensitive niche. It's like listening to a news podcast. 6 months after the episode has been released, it doesn't just. Yeah, I mean, I don't see myself reading newspaper of yesterday, let alone 6 months ago. So yeah, that's the sweet thing about having an evergreen podcast. Is people can always go back and listen to it and still get value from it.
And this is why I've talked to a number of news anchors. In the job I used to do, I was in carrier storage with like T-Mobile, AT&T all the time. And there was a news anchor from here that was on Channel 5 for 35 years. And she said to
Okay.
me, somebody said, hey, he has a podcast. And she looked at me and she goes, you guys are the future of radio. She says, in
Wow.
about 5 years, radio won't exist anymore. And I says, well, why do you think that? And she goes, because what you guys do is different than us. You guys preserve everything. So everything you put out there, it's kept and people can go back and they can listen to it. She goes, where on the news, nothing is really recorded. She goes, what you see on the air is, but that's it. So there's nothing preserved. You can't go back 2 days from now and listen to the same stories and see us do it. So I was like, wow, we're onto something. And I do notice that a lot of advertisers would rather advertise with a podcast than a traditional means because of the number of people that we can reach at any time.
Yeah, yeah. And once the ad, especially if it's a baked in ad, people can 3 years from now, 4 years from now, people can go listen to the episode and still listen to the ad, even though the time of the promotion was 3 years ago. And it's still they still get that brand awareness from new listeners that come to the podcast.
Right, right.
Yeah. Well, when you started the podcast, I just want us to step back with a day with crime. When you started the podcast, what was the experience like for the first 1 month, and what was the publishing schedule? What was it like? I would love to get a perspective on what it looks like running a father-daughter podcast. Yeah.
Well, actually, we got an opportunity to speak at Podcast Movement. I think it was 2019, which, if no one knows what that is the largest podcast convention in the world. And we were honored to do that. And that was the question you asked was one of them. So,
Okay.
for one, we had to make a pact. Both of my daughter and I are Scorpios. I don't really go by astrology as much, but if you know the sign, we're two Scorpions, they don't get along. So
Yeah.
we pretty much had to say, okay, if we're going to do this, there's going to be things we're going to agree on. There's going to be things we disagree on. So we're going to have to agree that whatever we're talking about podcast, it stays at the podcast. When the button to stop is over, when we stop the podcast, then that's it. We don't carry the grudge. So that was the one pact we had to make. And it always worked. There's a couple episodes where we got into a
Uh,
drag out fight on the air where I'm just saying this ain't it and saying this is not it. And then the moment that I say goodbye and we stop, we say, okay, well, talk to you tomorrow. um, when we released the very first episode, which is on OJ Simpson, this is what actually got my daughter to say, let's do a podcast because we always discussed that case, even though it's been years
yeah.
ago. And she says, well, why don't we start a podcast? Because we always talk about this and maybe somebody else would be interested in our opinion. And so that's how that got started. The first episode, I was nervous for the first year because even though I'm a musician, I've been a drummer for over 50 years. I knew something about audio equipment, but I didn't know about, reverb and how to actually properly edit it and what if there is any plugins to put in, because understand back at that point, which has been a total 9 years now, there was not the things we have for podcasting to this day. Riverside, which we're on right now, did not exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be able to do something simple like just have two people to record at the same time and also have somebody come in, that was a lot of equipment. It was thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So now we have all these aids that help us with doing podcasting because people's taking it seriously. But we didn't have that when we started at that point in time. So it was rough. If you go back and listen to that first season, I ain't gonna lie, it was rough, dude. I had some reverb that was too much. I had things
Yeah.
off. There was things I should have cut out, I didn't. But it was a learning process, and now 9 years later, I'm still doing it, and now I'm at the point to where I'm launching my own production company to actually
Yeah.
produce podcasts. This just shows you where you can go from point A to point B if you stick with that.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. When I started some of my podcast episodes, I started editing. A lot of things they were terrible. Sometimes some of the files that was recorded on Riverside, I realized that it recorded the guest part. But even though we had this conversation, like the way we're talking and we have a smooth conversation, at the end of the day, when I'm trying to edit, I realize that there is no track for me. And so the guest is just talking. And I'm like, wait, what is going on right now? And for me, that was like I would just sit down and I felt really sad because I know the episode was really, really great. And I'm like, how do I do this? Because how do I release this episode? Because the guests will just be like they're talking to themselves. And later on, after I found a way to solve the problem after many weeks of postponing the publishing dates because I have to find a way to get the file and all that. And I'm like, wow, I just realized that after all the problems, all the struggles I went through, and all the things that went wrong with Riverside, that I'm really pretty good at using it right now. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad that everything went terrible at the first time because now I can say that I understand it. And so if things happen, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not new. It happened before. Yeah, just adjust this, we're good. And yeah, so I'm glad that those days made you the man in terms of the one who can say, okay, yeah, we produce podcasts for people and you can say that with confidence and not say, oh, I'm not so sure.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things now, and I mean, the things that I teach is podcasting is very different to edit than if you have a music track, right? Like in a
Yeah,
music track, your drums and vocals and keyboards is supposed to be off sync and all that kind of stuff, where everything has to
yeah,
be together, right? So you learn all that kind of stuff and what editors to use, and now we got all kinds of plugins and stuff to help with, and still it takes a little bit of know how to do that kind of stuff. But through trial and error, I'm glad I figured that out. Now we are where we are. And I'm happy to do so because a lot of people that want to start podcasts don't know how to, or there's a lot of people that will charge a gazillion dollars just to do it. And you just started out, right? So you don't even know if you like it yet, but hey, I'll do this for a couple of grand.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. You're like, okay, and I get it if it's a network or a company like, I mean, let's say it's a company like Microsoft. It makes sense to charge them, thousands of dollars to produce their podcast. Like, of course, it makes sense. Like, I don't. That's not. I don't really. Yeah, those people they have money. But for someone like the mom, the dad, the young teenager who's trying to start a podcast and just share their message out there. And they don't even know, they're not even looking at to make money from the podcast. They just want to, have a conversation and share their message. Charging, I don't know what the amount is, $5,000. I've seen certain podcast production companies charge that. I'm like, ooh, well, they do have their target audience, but it's not encouraging for AD podcasters.
Right, right. I mean, and that's what happened with me. People's coming at me, hey man, we'll do it for $100 an episode. That's
Ooh,
$400 a month because I was releasing
ooh,
an episode every week. And so I was like, what if I haven't even made that yet, or I don't even know if I'm ever going to make that in podcasting?
yeah,
Well, I don't do that. And then that's what led me to do what I do, and that's why when people say, what's going to make my production company better than the ones that's out there is because I'm gonna edit your episode like I would do my own. The number
ooh,
one thing is
yeah.
I'm very, my name's on it and it's gotta sound kind of right. And I've had a couple of people try to produce for me and it didn't turn out. And I told my wife, I said, this is why I do what I do, because one dude just had the bass way up, where it was giving me a headache and my voice is already deep. I had another company that was kind of close, but didn't hit it. So I said, what if I just open a production company to where I, talk to people and say, hey, what do you want? How do you like my signature? Because my signature, if you listen to my show, is you have the intro, but then the signal that I'm ending the show is I will start playing the music right at the end of that. So now this is
Yeah.
supposed to signal to you, okay, hey, he's coming up at the end of his episode. That's kind of my signature. A lot of people don't do that. Um, but you have to do it with care and you have to treat it like it's your own show. And there's time constraints, as you know, to that. And so that's why I've opened up my own production company for that, to kind of help the little podcaster come up that maybe have 20, 30, 40 bucks to spend, but don't have that $100 to $300 to come off of right now.
When was this? When did you decide, say, okay, I'm going to start a production company?
About a year ago, because I was
Oh,
sitting on my
okay.
deck and I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And then at this point, I'm already producing 3 shows. I'm producing my own show. I'm producing Extinguish, which is my other show with my coworker. And then I'm also producing a show called Lost Girls, which was my co-author, Aladana, and her friend Amy. So I'm like, I already got 3 shows under my belt. I have a whole lot of edit cuts that I can show exactly what I can do, what it sounds like before and after. So I went to my wife and my business partner and said, hey, what if I just start a production company? And the focus would be to help those who has a little money but don't have a lot. And they said, I think that would be a good idea. So it's in the works right now. I do have a couple of clients besides the ones I just named. The website is currently being built, and we're trying to figure out the best way that's cost effective to do that. We already got who's going to build the site, but now we got to add certain things to it, like to make it convenient. Like,
Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind the scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
just upload a file to me or things of that nature. So yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. What fascinates me is the fact that almost every business, it's born out of a frustration, a desire. Yeah, because like you're like, oh, like this stuff sounds terrible. Well, I mean, what's the best way if you want something done right, you do it yourself. And you're like, oh yeah, you start a company. And in history, there's so many examples of businesses where you're like, oh, like I think one I was watching. What's the name of this movie? Ferrari Lamborghini. I think Lamborghini was trying to tell Ferrari. I can't remember exactly, but it was like, oh, you need to do the car like this. And it was like, what does someone who makes tractor know about luxury cars? And it was like, okay, I'm going to start my own luxury car. And that's how we have Lamborghini. And yeah, that's an interesting approach to, because now it's not just, oh, I'm starting it. Of course, we want to make money from business, but it's more like you understand the problem deeply, and so when you're solving the problem, you have a connection, and so you know when this, and you're not just putting things together and say, oh yeah, this is it, and take it.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like thinking about the Post-it note. And then you look at some inventions that happened years ago, you're like, man, I could have did that. But like you said, it was born out of frustration. The guy that created the Post-it note, he was mad because he couldn't get a little piece of paper to stick to his wall or his monitor. So he put a little glue in the back of it and said, hey, this works. Post-it notes. And I'm like, I could have did that. But that's definitely what it was, because there's a lot of things that I wish somebody would have came and said, hey, this is what's going to happen to you in your first year of podcasting. This is the equipment that you should look at if you're serious versus if you're not. And this is how much time is going to take. And I think that's one of the biggest ones, is people underestimate how much time is going to take. So having a producer is a lot of convenience, because all you're doing is sitting behind a microphone, you're recording it, and you're sending that file off to me, say, it's your job now to produce this track for me. So then that frees up a lot of time for family, work, and things of that nature. So
Yeah, and it can give you the if you have the time, you can then focus and double down on the thing you're pretty good at, which is researching for your show, showing up on camera, having better conversations, and yeah, connecting with your guest even after the episodes have been released and all that. Which, if you're deep in editing the episode, you won't really have time to say, okay, yeah, that's true. We talked about this on the episode. How's it going? My guest told me he was about to release a book. Yeah, how was the book launch and stuff like that? But when you have episodes to edit and release, you might even forget, and so it allows us to focus on the things that we want to do and we love to do.
Right, right. I mean, because like now, I record my own show, I edit my own show. I got the other two, and the Lost Girls episode, they do 2 a week, right? So, but they're short. They're like 5 to 10 minute episodes, because they wanted that, because they do 2 a week. But that's 2 times a week plus my show that comes out once a week, and then Extinguish. So that time starts to build up. So you find yourself trying to be ahead. But then when you have clients, they have different deadlines. So
Yeah.
somebody say, hey, can you do this in a 24-hour turnaround period? And so if you can, you take that bid. But if you can't, then you say, hey, I can't do it in 24. What about 48? So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that when you shared in the course of the conversation, you've shared hints of some of the obstacles you faced. But I just want us to zoom in on what would you say is the biggest roadblock you faced in podcasting?
Find time trying to get together with my daughter. We live in two different states. When we started doing that, just as a dual person, and even now with the podcast I shoot with Ladonna, it's always about time. We both have jobs. You have to find that time to do it. Then you start floating around with the idea of binge recording. And what that basically is you get together one day, maybe you record 12, 13 episodes. We do that kind of now and extinguish, but we didn't do that as much as they were crying because we didn't feel like the kind of podcast we had, it worked with that.
Okay.
And so there were certain things we changed. Like I would used to always tell you, hey, come in next week, we're gonna do this. And we stopped that because the beauty of running your own show is if there's breaking news that comes out, you don't have to get permission to shoot that show. You just go and
Yeah.
shoot. But I've already told you next week we're gonna talk about Nicole Sampson, but then I throw something else in that throws
Yeah.
the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So individually, it's just time again because you got balance time with the family. I do have a wife. I have 6 kids total, but only 2 live in the house. But you got the everyday thing. So I think for any podcaster, the biggest roadblock will be time. You have to examine if you have the time to sit down and do it. What days do you have to block off certain days to do nothing but editing versus recording? So time would be that roadblock.
Yeah, well, and I noticed that, while sharing the problem, in the course of sharing the problem, you did throw in some of the ideas and things you've done to deal with this roadblock. One of them is binge recording, and then you stopped saying, the next week we're going to talk about this in the next episode, so that people don't have people are not disappointed because you've created an expectation.
Right. And I do that sometimes now on True Common Authors. Like recently, I had to be gone for a while and I had just came back. But I know for a fact, because the way my show runs, if I tell you, hey, next week I'm bringing you author so and so, and then the week after that, extraordinary person, that's exactly what you're going to get because that's how my show is set up to run.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody every once in a while you may get a bonus episode. So if I just want to jump in and say talk about the P Diddy trial, that's not scheduled. But here's a bonus episode because I just wanted to get on here and cover this real quick. So to you, that's a bonus on top of whatever else I'm producing that week. So,
Yeah, yeah. Come to think of it now, it just occurred to me that for most podcasters, like most the average podcast, by average I mean, when you look at all the data, right, and then you do the mathematical average, right? So I'm not talking about average in the terms of, popular, or that's not what I'm saying. So by the average podcaster, they release an episode. I'm talking about active podcasters, because
okay.
the amount of podcasts that are not active will skew the statistics. So let's just remove those guys. uh the average active podcaster, they release an episode a week, right? Some do twice a week, some do 3 times, but most persons once a week. And so that's like 4 episodes in a month. And the average length for an episode is about an hour. And so that's like 4 hours. And so if we are fortunate enough to have the financial capacity to afford getting a producer, right? What will happen is that you would spend 1 hour for each recording. So that's about 4 to 5 hours in a month. That's if you're releasing 1 hour episodes. And so if you have a producer who basically, they would have access to the files and everything once you record. Sometimes they might even join you with recording, depending on the kind of producer and the kind of podcast you're running. They will handle all those things. They will edit the files, and sometimes they would help you with the uploading on the platforms, depending on the arrangement. And so what essentially happens is that if it depends on the kind of podcast you're running, you would basically just need prep time. And if it's a podcast like true crime, I feel that a podcast like true crime requires a lot of research, right? You have to go dig and find, so that takes a lot of time. But for some other podcasts where it's just you having conversations with people, getting them to share their story, that doesn't necessarily require a ton of research or digging, because now what's the word? It's like you have the dictionary right? You have the
Right.
source. You have the source right there with you. You just have to be curious enough to ask the questions and they will give you the answers. So you don't have to say, oh yeah, I'm going to like, do the research and all that. And so it will reduce the unnecessary stress. Because editing podcasts and how do I put it? Doing work that you don't know how to do or you don't like to do or love to do, but you have to do is stressful.
It is. And then, on top of that, especially with true crime, the audience, especially those that's deep into it, well, they want proof. Well, where did you read this from? And I tell them, I say, hey, Wikipedia is where I got this from, but I've done my own individual research and I'm going to throw something in that you guys don't know. Now, what I did fight for 8 years is I never had a script. Everything you've heard me do up until this last year has been straight off my dome because I've researched the case. I know the case. I know what I think about the case. And so I don't have a script. I never really believed in scripts. One day, the person who does all my scripts now came and said, hey man, just let me write your scripts. I'm like, I don't do scripts. I don't think it's genuine. You're not going to capture my voice. You're not going to be able to write it the way I would say it. And the scriptwriter I have now, well, that's exactly what she does. She's able to produce the script in my own voice. It's kind of funny because she'll write the script and she's also my researcher. So she goes, I'll take two things off your table. I'll take research off your table and I'll take writing the script off your table. And the first script I read, I was like, I'm like, this sounds like something that was just coming on the top of my head, right? Maybe we're just that in tune. The breaks that I would take, or the spots I would ad lib in, or the spots I want to add stuff in, or I would just break up the conversation. She wrote it to a degree to where it would be exactly like me.
Wow.
I'm fortunate because everybody can't find a scriptwriter that's like that. And that's why I never had a script because it's either cartoony or it comes off not genuine, or now people's using AI saying, hey, just write me a script for this, and they're passing it off. So if you find a good scriptwriter, I would say go ahead and do that. There's a couple things I have noticed from that. So your hour podcast now is shrunk. So I usually is 45 minutes to an hour all the time. When I got a scriptwriter, now my episodes is between 30 minutes to 45 minutes, sometimes 16 minutes, depending on the topic. Because what you find out is that script actually keeps you on pace. And if you don't have anything to keep you on pace, sometimes you go off on tangents, and that's fine. Especially with true crime is easy to do, and that's when you're an hour in. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's incredible. Someone does the research and you show up and yeah, I'm curious when you release the true crime episodes, is there a way like a site or a place where there's like a list of links of references of the places where those research like the data was gotten from? You understand what I'm saying? Where
Yeah.
so
So
that
my
people who want to learn more they can just click and go straight to those to the source of what of the research.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that I use or because even though she researches it, I'm still doing my own research too. I need to be knowledgeable of the case. So I drop all those links and I'll tell you, hey, all these links when I'm reading is in the show notes. So go click on
Okay.
those links for video or things of that nature. Most people don't read the show notes, but a lot of people do, which is how they come about your podcast. Hey, well, what's his episodes about? Okay, so that's going to be cool. So yeah, I list all the links there, and I'll tell people, hey, in the show notes of this episode, all of the links of what I'm reading to for them, you can go find them for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about show notes is that uh it's not for everybody to read, but for the people that want to read the show notes, they should find it to read. So it's like it should be there for those who care to check it out. Well,
Yeah,
but not.
I would say please read the show notes because it takes us forever to write them. But
I know a lot of listeners just like, yeah, he's just talking his own. I'm here for the podcast for what concerns me with show notes.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah. So far you've been podcasting for over 9 years now. What would you say is a lesson you learned the hard way, right? An experiment that didn't go as planned, but taught you something really valuable that you can still remember to date.
That people do look at you as a celebrity, and to a degree, they teach you as such. I'm gonna tell you what I mean by that.
Okay.
Nobody wants to admit this, but me and you and anyone who does podcasting or news, we're what they call public figures now. And all that means is
Okay.
just a person that deals with a public figure. There's nowhere around it. If you look into it, some of your bigger podcasts in the world, like Joe Rogan, and then there's some of like Crime Junkie, you always hear them in the news, whatever, and they go, well, you're a public figure. So we kind of are, right? Um, So I had a guy once that I had invited on. Well, he invited himself onto my podcast. Now, what happens if you
Okay.
go to my website? There is a link that says "Be a guest." You click that, it takes you to my calendar, and you're able to sign up to come on the show. But he signed up in a way to where he just expected it to happen overnight. And being that he was an author, I said, "Hey, if I always ask authors if you have a book, even if I have to buy it, let me know how to get it so I can read the book prior to you coming on, so I know what I'm talking about." And this guy booked like 2 days out, nowhere to get a book. Well, he started missing. I would show up, and he would say, "No, I got to postpone this at this day," and then he ended up really cussing me out. Was because he was like, well, every time I want to do this, I can't do it, or you say don't do it this way. And I was trying to be professional, but I finally lost and said, look, man, we are people too. And because you signed up for this quickly, and I've tried to give you a warning, I'm not going to take your abuse from that. So we're treated just like we're not human sometimes, because people, hey, you're on a show, you're supposed to come to my whims. Stand though, I'm still a human. I still have issues that go on like you do. I still have real life. I've had to cancel a couple of shows in the last year because the fact that I had real life happen, deaths and things of that nature. So let's not learn from that is, even though we don't look at ourselves as that, other people really do. They expect a certain level from us, which I always would give you that professionally. But once you cross that line and you're not professional anymore, don't expect me to be either, because I'm going to put you in your place at that point. But that's what I
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah. I feel like that is, what would I say? It's two sides of a coin. It's also a good thing because it means that people tune in to listen to you talk and say whatever advice you have to say regarding a particular field. That for me, I feel like it's a privileged position to be where I'm like, it's just me and so someone out there that I don't know. We're not friends from anywhere. We're not family members. They just discover my show and now they listen to my show every week and they just listen to me talk about whatever, if it's true crime, whatever the subjects of my podcast is. And I'm like, wow. When I see that, I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's nice.
That's why I always teach too. You have to be transparent with your audience. If
That's
something's
it.
going on, if you're going to change a format, if there's a reason you've been gone, transparency is key. If you listen to the last 3 episodes, I think one of those was where I've been. I told you flat out where I was at. Apologize. This is where I was at. Hey, I have a number of authors I interviewed. They haven't been put out yet. We're going to get those out soon. But if you're transparent with your audience, that builds that relationship to say, hey, if this guy is transparent with me about his life, then he's also going to be upfront with me about the things that he's discussing true crime wise. And that's what you need to be. So you always find I'm always transparent. I always give you my true feelings on the case. If there's something I don't agree with, like I've done a number of gay or LGBTQIA cases, if you, I tell people, if you, just because you don't agree with that, the person you're talking about, if you don't agree with it, is still a human. So you go from the human side of things. And one person said, hey, aren't you afraid of being upfront with your audience about certain feelings? And I said, no. Who would you rather listen to? Someone who tells you what you want to hear because they want to be your friend, or someone who's going to tell you the truth and hopefully we can still be friends and just have a conversation about it. So I think that's
Yeah.
also very important in podcasting.
Yeah. Oh. Uh, well, thank you so much for sharing that valuable lesson. And yeah, I want us to pull the curtains and step behind the scenes of your podcast production. Now, the question now is to you as a podcaster, not just to the podcast production. I know it's similar because it has your signature and and it's you doing it. But how do you make your own podcast? Like from idea to publishing, right? I know you gave some hints, but what are the tools you use? What are some of the recipes, the apps, the softwares, and all those things you use to cook some of the some of the amazing episodes you create on your podcast?
Well, if you're going to think about podcasts you never have, the first thing you have to think about is, what is the title of my show going to be? And what does that title mean? Your title of the
Okay,
show should always be reflective of what um, the show is going to be. So that was a lot of writing for me. So production was, I came up with the name, then I researched what I wanted to do. How many true crime
okay,
podcasts is out there that does the same thing I do? So what I was looking for is, how many True Crime Podcast has 2 faceted shows. I didn't find any. How many has 3? Okay, I'm on a niche. So I did find some that said, hey, I do nothing but authors. I do nothing but true crime. So then, okay, I got something here. I have a 3-faceted show. Let's hone in on that because that's going to separate me. Then from there, it becomes, what is my show going to be recognized by? So you have to look at your artwork. So your cover art for your podcast is important because of the fact that it should reflect your show. But if somebody just sees your podcast art, they should say, hey, that's True Crime and Authors. Many times I've been in restaurants and one of the people say, hey, do you guys listen to podcasts? Check mine out, True Crime and Authors. Somebody say, hey, I've listened to your show before. I remember your logo. Logos is very important. The other part to that is theme music. You should have some kind of an intro and an outro, even if it's just music, but that also makes you recognizable. So I had to sit down and say, okay, what does my theme music sound like? Because all of this, you have to tell the people producing that, here's the feel that I want. Here's what I want it to feel like. Do I want a male or female to voice my intro? If I do, why it's that? Everything has to be a question that you should be able to solve at the end of that. If you can't solve that puzzle, keep rolling the dice. And then after that is basically what you want to talk about. I have over 1,000 cases that I've surmassed that I still haven't done yet. You always have those in the coffers. So from beginning to production, what it looks like, you got to get your title, you got to get your research in because you don't want to be in that same niche. Look at true crime, dude. There's like 1 billion of us out here that's doing it. So you got to get that niche just right, get that logo and that music. Once you have those things in place, those things stays put all the time. You're never really changing those. I've only changed my theme music like once. You don't want to change your theme or your logo all the time because then it takes away from your branding. Nobody remembers who you are because you keep changing everything. So then after that, now it's just down to, what am I going to record? What am I going to research? What case do I?
Before we proceed, I'd love to for you to answer a question on the theme music. How do you get your theme music?
So my theme music was created by a young lady from Fiverr at the time that now she's broken off her own company. Her name is Jackie. For the longest time though, my first one, I had a guy that did it. And it was really showy. It sounded like I was at a disco or like I was at a club. You know, it was nothing but sound effects. Boom, welcome to True Crime and Authors. And then as I got into it, I said, I really want something a little bit more subtle, something with a little bit more music. He was from Fiverr. So Fiverr is a good source. They have a lot of good people that does things. But I wanted a female to intro my show. A lot of reasons. There's female empowerment, but I just felt like with my show, having a female introduce me just sounded better and right than it did to have a guy. And I play with both of those. And so again, it's about finding the right person that can capture that. When I met Jackie, I had listened to a couple other women and tried to get them to do it. I'm like, yeah, it just don't sound kind of right. And then I met Jackie and I said, here's what I want it to sound like. Here's the feel that I want. And I was like, your thing said you could do anything, so here it is. And then it was a click. So you have to go, just don't grab onto somebody because it says they do intros and outros. Listen to them, send them questions. This is the feel I want. Even test it out. And once you pick that person, you work with them until it's good. So now I would never switch Jackie out at this point, unless something happens, I need a new intro. She's not around anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, I might need to ask for a link to check her a company because I'm in the market for an intro, an actress.
I would definitely do that. Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
oh, wow! You've become ambassador for Jackie. Well, isn't that what happens when we have a good business? You know, your customers go on to talk about you even when you're not there.
Yes, and she's used for both of my podcasts. Just to let you know, I went to my partner and said, "Hey, we need an intro. What do we use? The girl I use for True Crime and Authors," and she said, "Sure." So Jackie, you can hear voicing Extinguished, and then you hear her intro for True Crime Extraordinary People. Now, if you listen to both shows, you'll get what I mean because it is the same woman, but she sounds
Different,
different
yeah.
depending on the show, right? So
Yeah, I get it. It's like you see, how do I explain that? It's like, yeah, that's what they call them, voice actors. It's like, it's the same. You see the same actor in this movie. You're like, it's the same person. But why is this guy timid and all those stuff? And then you go to this other movie and it's like, this guy is this, and, right? It's the energy. It's the whole idea that the director, which in this case is the podcast host, wants for the show and the whole feel and the vibe. Yeah,
yeah.
I get it. Yeah. Some persons, they are just rigid, right? It's the same way. Even if you tell them this is the way I want it to be, it's the same thing. As much as they keep trying, like you just notice that, well, you edited it, but it's the same thing. You didn't change anything.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so sorry for the interruption. I just had to clear that part out, and you had to go about explain how the individual episode is being made. Now that we've gotten the full or show dealt with the episode.
So the episode to be made, depending on, you decide which one you want to do, you want to talk about. Like, for instance, I'll just give you a little hint. By the time this airs, it'll probably be there. But my next episode come out in 2 weeks because I was author time and then extraordinary person is going to be on prison reform. That's what I'm going to do it on.
Okay.
Even though my scriptwriter and researcher has done extensive research, so have I. So now what that looks like is I sat down, I look at prison reform. I want to look at where is prison reform the highest, who has the highest incarceration rates, what's the percentage of African Americans versus Asians versus white people. What does people get for the same crime? Why does prison reform needs to happen? You have to answer all those questions because in that episode, that's what you have to cover and that's what your audience is going to look for. Okay, well, how many percentage of this is there? So I can tell you for a fact that where I live, which is in California, we are the largest incarcerated state. We have the largest incarceration down here. And so reform needs to happen here. So that's what you look at. Whatever you're talking about, okay, what research can I do? Where can I look? Wikipedia is a good start, but it's not 100% reliable. So you're looking at pulling some news clips or maybe some YouTube videos or whatever it is to go with that. At David McClam, we told you we're reading from Wikipedia because this is easier for you to follow along. But we've done extensive research. And the way I prove that is I try to pull something out of that case that nobody even knows. And then they go, oh, I never knew that. So he does research. If you have a quick minute, I'll tell you the story that I shocked my own daughter when we did the Trayvon Martin case. And we got a lot of feedback from that, especially from the African American side, because as you know, as I feel, Trayvon Martin's case was a racist case. George Zimmerman shot him out of racism. But my daughter, for whatever reason, didn't believe that. And she came up with all of these reasons why it wasn't a racist case. And if you listen to the episode, I'm getting frustrated because when I do cases that deals with race of any kind, I always tell you the first thing I do is I remove race from the equation completely unless I can't remove it anymore. So as I go through the case, I'm building a case for if this is racism or not. And when it gets to a point to where it's just there, you can't deny it anymore.
Yeah.
And so finally in the middle of the episode, because I had called her and I said, hey, I have something I'm going to tell you that I don't think you even know. But I'm not going to tell you till we do the episode because I want your genuine reaction. So finally I had it. So as she went through why this is a racist, says, what if I told you that the person that actually had the gun, that George Zimmerman auctioned the gun off? And she froze. And he did. He auctioned the gun off to a guy, I believe he went by the name Racist Shoot Face. He bought the gun for, I can't remember how much it was, but it was a lot of money. And they asked George Zimmerman, they said, what are you going to do with the money? And he flat out said, I'm going to use the money to derail Black Lives Matter and to up the police for racism issues. And she was shocked. So that was a tidbit that nobody even knew existed. But you find out when you dig that. So do your research and make sure you're accurate.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to drill in. What are some of the tools, the platforms, the apps you use for the podcast?
Oh my goodness. So way back in the day when we started, there was really no tool, right? There was no website that was built for you. So I used a Focusrite USB interface at first with some microphones that I had already had from being a musician. And then as time went on, we started finding these things. So nowadays, I do use a Rodecaster Pro 2. I also have a Rodecaster Duo, which is a smaller version of that for when I go on the go. Riverside is my main go-to for when I'm using, when I need to interview people or do remote interviews. My microphone, I fell into the pressure. I started out with the Rode Pod mic. And then now I'm the Shure SM7B. So if you
they got to you.
Yeah, you know anything about podcast, that's 30% how to use this. But then I got it because I'm like, man, this Shure. I messed around with someone, they had one on display. And I said, man, this Shure SM7B really does bring the bass in my voice out. But it's
Yeah.
very a $400 microphone. So I'm just like, how do I justify that? But for
Yeah.
Rode for $99, let me tell you, that is great mic. I used that for years until I fell into this. But yeah, that's what I use. And of course, I have a hard drive that's 8 terabyte. That's where I store all of my stuff at. But yeah, it's simplest for you guys now. And then for editing and things of that nature, I do use, I'm on a Mac. So I started using Logic Pro, Logic Pro 10, which is what I'm still on. There's a number of things in Logic Pro 10 I do like. Even though it's formulated for musicians, it does help podcasters. So that's what I use to edit. And
Yeah. Now that you
basically it.
mentioned Logic Pro, I just realized that I did not ask you at the beginning. Is your podcast audio only or audio and video?
So my podcast right now is uploading audio. I do
Okay.
use the video portion of that for marketing.
Oh,
So
okay.
on TikTok and YouTube, I'm starting now to just put little clips up. That's the other beauty about Riverside. Riverside has come a long way. It used to just be a platform where you just recorded stuff. Now is all, and now you have everything in Riverside except for hosting. If they ever did a hosting company, there'd be set. And that's
Yeah.
another thing I forgot to mention. My website that I have is by a company called PodPage. You guys check them out if you're looking for one.
Yeah.
They give it to you for free. You just type in your RSS and it builds you a page. I've been with them now 3 years. I have their premium package on that. But it was made for podcasting. And a lot of the sites are not. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. If you could go back to day one, what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Make sure you have time to do it. Because I've always done it for the right reasons, but when I got into it, man, now I should have known better because I did YouTube for 15 years. And depending on your creative juices, here's where being a creative person uh, kind of backfires on those of us that are. You see one thing when you're recording it, but then, especially if you're doing a video, but then when you start to see it, your mind starts to float, and then you start to say, hey, what would this look like? Or what if I threw this in? Or what is a person going to see? So sometimes when I did YouTube, I also did a thing where I did a whole thing on Michael Jackson. That took me an hour to shoot and 12 hours to edit.
Ooh.
Because by the time I was done, I had all these. Every time I mentioned somebody, like if I said Jerry Lee Lewis, he'll pop up in the screen and things of that nature. So time, and make sure you limit that time to say this is all I'm gonna do, and then I'm out. So
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that advice. Now, we at the rapid fire phone section, I'll just ask you 4 questions, and yeah, rapid. I like to call it the lightning round.
okay.
Okay. What's the favorite podcast you've ever guested?
Besides yours, I'm gonna have to say because I do enjoy your show.
Okay.
I did have a podcast on the Ninja podcast, and this lady
Okay.
was over 70, and she still is. She's a real ninja. Oh, that was one of my favorite shows.
What's the name of the podcast?
I think it's called the Ninja Theory. He's still out there.
Okay, the Ninja Theory. Okay. What's one habit you credit for your podcasting success?
Trying to be consistent.
Okay. Wait. Okay. Trying to be consistent. Is that a
So
habit?
yeah, consistency is a habit
Okay.
that you
Okay.
have to learn and fall into. So yeah, trying to make sure that that episode is out there every week, regardless. So yeah, that is a
What's a
habit.
what's a book, tool, or resource you can't recommend enough?
I have to say, just for a book to read, The Girl I Never Knew Who Killed Melissa Wett. That's how I met my partner. It does with the murder case that's 30 years old that they're still looking for, and that really resonates with me. So that's one of the books I've read several times.
Okay. What's next for you? Any bold experiments or pivot plans on the horizon?
A lot of things are being talked about. There's another podcast that my partner and I are thinking about doing that deals with people who were roommates of serial killers that we never knew. Also,
Ooh.
there's a documentaries that we are trying to put in the works as well, and then finally getting my production company launched. So, and I'm trying to write a book. Just by the way, I'm trying to write a book on
Wow.
podcasting. So, a lot
Okay.
of things.
I would love to interview you when you write the book or you launch the podcast. Either of those things you just mentioned. I'd love to do a chapter 2 of this podcast story, and so we can just keep doing it, and year after year, and say, "Oh, chapter 2." And that would be fun. The last time you were here, you talked about these. So what happened since the last time we spoke?
Right?
Yeah,
No, I'd be down to do that. I'd be honored to come back.
Yeah, yeah. I'll reach out to you, even though I feel like you would reach out to me, but nah, I don't. I know with so many things going out there, I'll be in your DM and say, yeah, yeah. It's been 6 months since I interviewed you. What's been going on? Let's do some catch up. Book a
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's been an absolute delight chatting with you. When I was just looking at my events for today, and I just noticed your name, and I was like, wow, yeah, this will be interesting, because I felt like the first interview I did for that podcast was more like a catch up, like, warm up. Like, oh yeah, I just seen for the first time Stranger Danger, and this podcast is just different. Thank you so much, David. Where can listeners learn more about you and what you?
So for the podcast, then true crime and authors at gmail.com is the email address. Also, truecrimeandauthors.com is the website there. The website for the business, which is called Eye of Justice Productions, is still in the works, but you can email me there, info@eyeofjustice.com.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a smooth conversation, and I'm looking at the time now. I'm like, wow, how time flies.
It does, man. Thank you, Wisdom. It's been an honor to come back. It's a pleasure to see you again, and I look forward to coming back sometime in the future.
Wow, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story, because someone out there needs to hear it.